Here on my OnePlus 7T Pro 5G phone, I have some news. I have some information that a lot of Nintendo fans have been waiting for a very long time. What is up, everyone? OJ over here from Player Essence. Welcome back to another video on the OJX channel. It's been a little bit of time, but we are back with a cool video because we're talking about the thing that the Nintendo Switch has been needing for quite some time, and one of the contributing factors to why the Nintendo Switch has not gotten some of the third-party games out there. 64 gigabyte cartridges seem to be set for 2020. Now, what does this mean? What are we talking about? Well, let's just break it all down. So the Nintendo Switch uses cartridge technology. I mean, are we in the 90s? No, we're not in the 90s. We're in the 2019s, going to the 2020s, and we have cartridge technology that the Nintendo Switch has been using since 2017. These are these little tiny cartridges that hold data. Now, cartridges are fast and cartridges are, they don't get scratched up. I mean, they're pretty good, right? But the only problem is that they're expensive. They're expensive to hold memory. You can have a Blu-ray that holds far more data on them. So that has been a limiting factor for developers out there when bringing their games to the Nintendo Switch. Or some developers that had to really crunch things down, because, like, man, we just can't get everything on this 16 gigabyte cartridge, or we don't want to pay for the 32 gigabyte cartridge, or there's always been some type of issue, right? Well, with the 64 gigabyte cartridges coming out, it does seem like that issue is about to be squashed. Now, according to a recent article that I got here from Go Nintendo, we're going to read off what is going down with these 64 gigabyte cartridges, and then we'll kind of break down a little bit more what this means for the end user out there. So all the way back in December 2017, we heard that Nintendo was pushing their plans for the 64 gigabyte game cards into 2019 due to technical issues. We went all of 2019 without seeing that, but it looks like those game cards are indeed coming soon. A report from the Taipei Times mentioned that flash memory maker Macronix is moving on its 3D NAND in the second half of 2020, and apparently their first customer is Nintendo. Macronix is the company behind the flash memory in the current Switch game cards, so wouldn't it be surprising to see them handling 64 gigabyte option as well. This is big news for game makers out there. This is big news for the Nintendo Switch, but the one thing that I'm kind of worried, or not say worried more so, or just kind of like want to know a bit more about is how much is this going to cost? Because there isn't a lot of developers out there that have been using a 32 gigabyte cartridge, right? That is available for developers to use, and almost nobody has used that. I think I can count on one hand the amount of 32 gigabyte cartridge games out there. Dragon Quest Heroes 1 and 2, that's one of them. We have The Witcher 3, which is, I think, the only Western game. We also have, I think, Final Fantasy. It was like 10 and 10-2. And that, like that double pack, that uses a 32 gigabyte cartridge as well for the Asian release. Here in the West, it was just like a download code for the other game. So there aren't many games out there that use it, and there might be another game or so, but for the most part, there are no more than 5 games. I don't think so. So to see a 64 gigabyte option, even though developers have had options for 32 gigabytes for a while, but have kind of refrained from using it because of the cost of the cartridge, tells me a couple things. Well, one, that if there's the 64 gigabyte option coming out in 2020, that means they've gotten the 32 gigabyte option for a cheaper price, or the cheaper price will be secured. So we could see more developers put out games on the 32 gigabyte option if that has been reduced in price. Another thing that tells me is that maybe, just maybe, that everything has been reduced. So even with the 16 gigabyte cartridge and also with the 64 gigabyte cartridge, you're going to get way better prices than what we got before. And I would hope that that would be the case, because it's already been 3 years, or we're going to be going on 3 years of the Nintendo Switch in 2020, and we were supposed to see these cartridges apparently back at the end of like 2017 or something like that. Something happened to where, whether it was the 32 gigabyte cartridge and that was causing some issues in terms of production, maybe there wasn't enough orders coming in, maybe there was just issues with the pricing and what they were planning on doing. It just caused a big rift, and it caused the 64 gigabyte cartridges to be delayed. Now, there was some rumors tying all of this back to like Grand Theft Auto, and if that's going to be coming, because if Grand Theft Auto was going to come, it had to be on a 64 gigabyte cartridge, considering how big that game is. So does this mean that we could see Grand Theft Auto 5, for example, that game on the Nintendo Switch in 2020. I don't know about all that, but that's definitely going to be the speculation that people are going to be putting out there, considering that that's one of the main things with the Nintendo Switch. Some people look at it as, oh, well, it's all about like the power of the system, and that's why some games aren't coming over, but that's just not the case. I think a lot of developers have more issues with just the space limitations of what the Nintendo Switch cartridge is, and they don't want to do the whole, okay, well, download like 75 gigs on your Nintendo Switch, because most people aren't going to have enough space. Doesn't have that default in the system because it uses that expensive flash memory on board, and there's just not going to be a lot of that. I mean, yes, there's expandable memory, but some developers are just like, we're not going to do that. It's not going to be profitable for us. So I think that having this option here, or even reducing the 32 gigabyte option to where it's the price of the 16 gigabyte option, and maybe the 64 gigabyte option is only slightly more expensive than the 32 gigabyte option, that would be a very good thing. But I'm still wary of like a couple things, like I stated here, just because the price of this, because we already know like 32 isn't very common. Like, what's these 64 gigabyte cartridges going to be? But it's going to be interesting to see going forward who actually uses this and what happens with it, because once again, that was one of the like big things. Where is the space at for some of these games? But we'll just have to wait and see how it all plays out. Now, one more thing that I want to get into with these cartridges and with Macronix and everything, and going to Nintendo Switch, I think that this might prompt Nintendo maybe to start using bigger cartridges as well too, because they really only use 16 gigabyte cartridges. Nintendo doesn't really go over that, so maybe they've even secured for them, at least for their own games, to where they can have a 32 gigabyte cartridge be standard. Maybe Metroid Prime 4, for example, that game could be like a 32 gigabyte cartridge game, or maybe even more. So I'm pretty sure it'll be optimized, but I think that this opens up avenues and opens up lanes for not only third-party developers, but for Nintendo themselves. But if I had to guess, if I had to put some games out there that could take advantage of the 64 gigabyte cartridge, I think there is a number of stuff out there. Obviously, Ubisoft's games, Ubisoft and Nintendo have a good relationship, so maybe we see more of Ubisoft's games come over. We saw the Assassin's Creed games come over to the Nintendo Switch, which those did get a physical release. So maybe we see some of the other stuff that Ubisoft puts out, like a Rainbow Six or something like that, on the 64 gigabyte cartridges or the cheaper 32 gigabyte cartridges. We can also look at something like Call of Duty, for example, maybe come over to Nintendo Switch, because those games are always like 500 gigabytes on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. You want to download those games? You want to put those games into your system and play right away? You absolutely won't. You'll be sitting there and installing the game for a very long time unless you preload it or something like that. So maybe this will bring over Call of Duty to the Nintendo Switch, because maybe that was an issue for Activision, which would be the cartridge size. Heck, they had 2 Call of Duty games on the Wii U. There was Call of Duty on the Nintendo DS. So maybe they finally get on board with a 32 gigabyte cartridge or a 64 gigabyte cartridge, now that those are going to be coming out in 2020. I also think that pretty much any other Western developer that has maybe released some content on the Nintendo Switch, but not other things, could jump in at this point. Maybe we see something else from like a Take-Two, right? They've had some games on the Nintendo platforms out there. They have like LA Noire. I know that was Rockstar and them kind of teaming up to put that on the Nintendo Switch. We did hear about all the different port studios, the main ones like Panic Button, Virtuos. They're all working on content for the Nintendo Switch. They're all working on unannounced games. From what we understand from the different interviews that they've made from 2019, they're pretty much always working on new content. Maybe some of them are taking advantage and interpreting some of these PlayStation 4 and Xbox One games. And heck, maybe even the next generation for Microsoft and Sony, maybe they're even working with them so they can put that on the Nintendo Switch with these scalable engines like Unreal Engine 4 and a lot of the different stuff that they've already been using on the Nintendo Switch, PS4, and is going to go to PS5 and the next Xbox and all of that, or the Xbox Series X, or just, they said the new Xbox, guys. Let's just get this right. It's just called Xbox. This is what it's called for the Xbox Series X, but that's just the series of the Xbox. So I think that it really comes at a good time. Obviously, 2020 is going to be a great year for gaming. We have the new systems that are coming out. We have potentially these 64 gigabyte cartridges to where we can see bigger games from these developers. And then also maybe we see see utilization of the 32GB cartridge more, since maybe that one has went down in price. So there's kind of like a lot of things to look over and a lot of things to analyze, and it's going to be interesting because you know there's going to be all sorts of rumors and talks rolling around with this whole 64GB cartridge thing. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But what are you guys' thoughts on this? Let me know what you think about the 64GB cartridges and what games could potentially come over with that extra space unlocked if they feel like spending the money on those cartridges. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this OJX video here. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share the video if you can. It really does help us out, and we will see you guys for the next OJX video. Peace.